Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second day of the Global Pulse Confederation annual meeting, and we have a very exciting lineup today for presentations, and we're going to begin with the Global Lentil Outlook. And I first want to recognize our sponsor for this event, which is Simpson Seeds from Canada. Simpson Seeds is the largest independently owned specialty crops processor in Saskatchewan, Canada, and certainly give their thank them for sponsoring this outstanding panel. So I'm going to introduce our moderator for this event. Farhan Adam is the Chief Executive Officer of the Marina Commodities, Inc., part of Marina Group based in Toronto, Canada. The company was established in 2002 and is engaged in trading and exporting of pulses from all over the world, dealing mainly in lentils, peas, chickpeas, and beans. Farhan comes from a family business involved in international trade for the last 3 generations. His business includes textiles, real estate, and the stock exchange. Prior to joining the pulses export business, Farhan graduated from the University of Toronto with an honors degree in finance and economics. So please join me in welcoming our moderator for the Global Lentil Outlook, Farhan Adam.
Good morning and welcome to Vegas, the city that never sleeps. I can see we have a full house this morning, or perhaps not. It means most of us were probably trading lentils at the casino table last night. My name is Farhan Adam from Marina Commodities in Canada. I'm honored to be your moderator for the 2015 Global Lentils Outlook session. I would like to thank Sissels for this wonderful opportunity and Simpson Seeds for sponsoring today's event. Our format this morning will be split into 2 categories. Similar to the roulette table, the black and red odds will be replaced by green and red lentils. Both sessions will feature our guest speaker, and then we will hear from our esteemed panel of experts. At the end of our discussions, our audience will have an opportunity to ask questions. I hope that sounds good. I'm not sure if anyone has won at the casino yet, but we have definitely hit the jackpot with our guest speaker and team of experts. To say they're full of beans would certainly be an accurate statement. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Clancey from Stat Publishing, Quinton Stewart from Viterra, Canada, Onur Ozdemir from Arbel, Turkey, Anurag Tulshan from Esarco, India, and we are missing 2 other panelists, Prabhat and Peter. I'm not sure where they are, but hopefully they're coming up soon. As our panel gets settled in, I know we all have lentils on our minds. And what an exceptional year for the lentils market. The unexpected continuous demand from India last year, the surprise rainfalls during harvest in Canada, the ongoing logistical issues, the record exports out of Australia and Canada going into a near zero carryover stock, the more or less expected increase in the new crop acreage this year, the ongoing GMO issue in Turkey, the most recent rainfalls in India damaging crops. Wow. What an exceptional year. And I'm sure we're heading to another one. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce a dynamic industry leader whose expertise and experience have allowed us to use his stats daily to make better decisions for the future. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Clancey from Stat Publishing, who will discuss the current and future prospects of the green lentil market. Brian, please do us honor.
Actually, it's kind of nice coming here as a Canadian because we actually get to have a first taste of summer, which is in Canada, as you know, is very cold. But I live in the West Coast, so we actually have kind of almost summer all the time. It's actually neat because I always tell people up there in the wintertime, you can go golfing in the morning, you could go to the beach, and then in the evening you can go up skiing, and all within about an hour. So it's a very interesting place to live. I'm going to go through green lentils first, and then secondly, later on, I'll talk about reds. It's difficult to separate the two because the lentils are lentils, and they're highly integrated in terms of production, the influences in the market, and things of that nature. But I'll do my best to kind of split up my thinking between the two. We're probably looking in a situation where green lentil production will be up this year, mainly because of Canada. Some increases in other parts of the world. But as you can see from the slide, production is down below the recent 5-year average. And that reflects some of the big crops we had in Canada a few years ago, the disastrous crop of 2010, which was poor for quality. And then again, we had a repeat last year with quality issues. And I think Gerald Donkersgood a couple of years ago asked what the new normal is in Canada, whether or not it would be the good crop that we had in 2013 or the bad crop that we had in 2010. Interestingly, we ended up with another bad crop last year in terms of quality. And that creates a lot of issues for servicing markets around the world and things of that nature. Hopefully this year will be drier and we'll see better quality overall in North America. The world situation for green lentils is we're looking at probably an overall increase in supply availability, but I think that the ending stock situation will remain relatively tight. We're looking at a year where there should be good trade volumes. It'll be somewhat constrained by the transportation issues and also where lentils are being grown in the world. And that will perhaps result in a slight decrease in the amount of green lentils that are being traded in the coming year. When you get into inferred use, that includes a large component for feed diversion in Canada. That is always a controversial number. This season, we're looking at a decrease in the amount of lentils that are being diverted into feed in Canada, and that's reflected in the decline in overall use. Which is the amount of lentils that are diverted into feed. The interesting thing when you look at the export side is Canada is clearly dominant in the world of exports. And that's why when I look at both red or green lentils, I'm going to look at the Canadian S&D instead of going at too many countries, partly for time constraints, but also because, when you're looking at lentils and other pulses, peas, if Canada gets a cold, if Canada sneezes, the world catches a cold. So Canada is very important for trade. United States is now the second largest exporter of green lentils in the world, and then after that you fall into smaller suppliers like China and a few other countries. When I was doing this slide, what I did was I looked at official exports from all the countries around the world and derived the trade numbers that way rather than trying to look at individual countries, their own data. On the import side, for green lentils, it's very distributed. India is the number one importer of green lentils in the world right now, but they have a very small share overall. So the market's very distributed for green lentils. There's no single destination that is overpoweringly dominant. That's a big change from the way it was 25 years ago when Latin America and Europe were the two main areas that we were selling green lentils into. And there's this spread around the world. And that probably helps with the way prices work because you'd end up with greater diversity of demand, but it also creates problems because you have to work so many different markets and many of the markets are smaller. For Canada, large green lentils is the main lentil that's grown in Canada, the main green lentil in Canada. We're looking at an overall increase in area this year. I think that lentils in general in Canada will be up. Red lentils more than green, and we'll look at that later. But I think green lentils will also experience an increase in area. And that's a simple reflection of the fact that prices have been good this year and movement has also been good. You can see also that we're looking at a situation where we're at or under 10% stocks to use ratio. When you're under 10%, you are effectively sold out because you're in a situation where you're trying to get farmers to give you the last of the stuff in their bins, and it's very difficult to do that. And that's one of the reasons that prices will stay firm through the end of the crop year. They'll obviously move around a little bit, but they'll stay steady. For the next year, I think that we're looking at a situation where the stocks will not be in such an excess to demand that it would cause prices to decline significantly. So we're probably looking at another year of relatively firm prices. They probably should be lower on average because of the production increase. But I think that markets will probably set their lows early in the season and then trend upwards from there. And you can see in the prices for green lentils, this looks back over 10 years. And we're not at the high end of prices this season, and we are definitely trending down, and that's just trending into new crop. But and I think that probably that trend will hold in place, and so next season could be lower on average. And so we're not going to hit some of those highs that we saw a few years ago. And you can see that there was, for a few years there, significant volatility. A lot of that had to do with the ethanol policies in the United States, which created more competition for land use. And we'll see that, we're seeing less of that now because pulses are significantly more competitive. This is an interesting chart because what I did here was I looked at each month, the average price each month is a percent of the average annual price for each marketing year. And you can see that there's a certain amount of seasonality. And one of the interesting things is that the way prices move throughout the year being weaker or stronger. And one of the influences there is that farmers, when they see a year where prices are strong in a certain part of the year, they'll tend to hold lentils off the market at that time, expecting prices to be stronger. And so that's what causes this to move around. And I think that if you're looking at this, we'll probably see prices, farmers should resist selling in the early part, so that may cause some competition for grower stocks. And that could contribute to firmer prices. But in the end, it will result in lower prices because if they're not selling into the market, stocks just simply rise relative to outstanding demand. So we're looking at a larger overall crop. We'll definitely have periods of lower prices. I do think, though, that we'll probably set the lows early in the season for export. And then we will have problems probably in the fall, not just transportation problems, but problems sourcing stuff from farmers, which will add some strength to markets. And stocks will remain relatively tight throughout the marketing year. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. You have certainly whet our appetite. Let's now hear the opinions of our experts on green lentils. Quinton, I'll put you on the spot. Do you agree with Brian that Canada will produce almost 30% more than last year?
Certainly, there's been a clear message to the Canadian grower right from the last 4 months that they should be growing lentils. It applies to both green and red lentils. So I do believe there will be a 10 to 15% increase in acreage. From a production perspective today, moisture conditions are reasonably good. As it stands right now, seeding should be on time. In the main green lentil growing area specifically, you're looking at seeding potentially in the next 10 to 12 days. For that to happen, then you should have average to above average yields. So we certainly will have more supply. I think the interesting thing will be more so in terms of what the quality of that supply will be. As we've seen on the old crop side, there aren't a lot of higher quality green lentils left to market. And even the extra 3 and number 3 quality seems to be making its way very quickly over to India. So if we have any quality issues in the fall and do not have a lot of high quality or high extra 2s or number 1 quality, then you could see those spreads widen as well.
But do you agree that we will have a 30% higher production, or your estimates are around 10-15%? This is what I read. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess from my side on a production for Laird's, if you're looking at an acreage base of roughly 900,000 tons, 650,000 ton production of Laird's out of Canada is fairly realistic.
All right. Okay. What do you think? How much current inventory do we have in Canada and US of the green lentils, like all grades? All
grades. I mean, certainly stocks are tight. On the Canadian side, I think that there's somewhere in the range of 100,000 tons that is still available. Obviously, the grade distribution is more so to the lower side there. Personally, I think that the Canadian grower will market the majority of that. On the U.S. side, certainly stocks are tight as well, and so no different there.
All right, thanks. Onur, I would like to know, Turkey generally imports #1 lairds. Is that used generally for your local consumption, or is it used for the re-export market?
Good morning, everyone, first of all. I wish everybody good luck in Vegas. Turkey is main #1 sized layered market. Our local people, our housewives choose the biggest and the greenest color if they can. But we also, being as a transit country, because of our position, we can export to Iran very quickly on the north parts. And 2 years ago, since Dubai was a little bit closed on the financial system, the Iran traffic moved to Turkey because of the transactional issues. But we see a slowing and movement of this traffic going down and down right now. So basically we consume our own production plus we import 35,000 tons from Canada for all local consumption.
All right. And they will only continue to buy these size #1s, or is there a market for the lower grades as well?
Yes, they prefer #1s, first of all, because of the color. But if there's no #1s available in Canada, we will buy #2s, and we will try to color sort them to make #1s.
All right, thank
So
you.
it's a color-oriented market.
Thanks, Onur. Prabhat, we hear that you are an expert in the North African market. Algeria is the second largest importer of green lentils. What do you think are the stock positions in Algeria? Do you think they still need to cover their positions for the current crop, or can they wait until the new crop?
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies, and thank you very much for the kind words. Algeria, I would say, in terms of stock levels, they are not very high. They are basically, I would say, maybe 15 to 20 days of coverage right now. They've had one bout of purchases just before the markets moved up. Now I think they are on the lookout. In spite of local currency depreciation of 25%, local markets continue to be high. Local markets are not having any kind of, or not giving any kind of losses to the importers. So importers would be on the lookout for opportunities wherein they can buy at decent values before the new crop also.
So would they be buying #2s only, or can they consume like extra 3s and #3s as well?
The extra 3s, there is an experiment which had happened 4 or 5 years back, and it backfired. There are lots of issues at the port. I think people would be wary to touch extra 3s, but obviously if the difference goes very high and there are no offers or not many offers for #2s, they might look at that. But that's still a question mark.
So with the price, they might switch over to the lower grades as well?
Some people would want to take that risk.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Peter?
Good morning, everybody. I guess from an Australian perspective, green lentils are still a work in progress. We've got some, promising material coming through our plant breeding program, but we're clearly not a significant or not a player in green lentils at all. From our perspective, we look at the green lentil market from a substitution perspective and how it might impact demand for things like dun peas into South India, where they, if green lentils get too expensive or pigeon peas get too expensive, it will drive demand towards Aussie duns. But, green lentils, we are starting to get a coterie of loyal producers, and the product that we're producing is clearly hitting the spot with the customers. So, for us, it's a developmental project.
I believe there was a variety called Boomer at one time. Is it still going on? Is the production is small? I'm not sure.
The production is extremely small. I mean, it's microscopic in the context of pulse production in Aussie, but it seems to be performing okay. The demand for Boomer is very, very strong, and it certainly outstrips the supply of the product. So it's a work in progress for us. And I guess from a Pulse Australia perspective, I'm equally not keen to push Plant Breeding Australia and our broader resources into, spreading ourselves too thin from a, genetic development perspective. We've got a lot of other crops that we're really trying to get, established. So,
thank you. Anurag, India has again come out with very large numbers in South India for tenders. How much of that demand do you think is for the Canadian green lentils? What sort of impact can we see? Like, is it going to be big or is it going to be a very small number?
Good morning, everybody. Farhan, basically, the green lentils are sold only into the southern parts of India, wherein the state government of Tamil Nadu, they are very active in buying green lentils as they distribute it through the public distribution system. And this year, basically, green lentils act as a substitute to pigeon peas, and because of lower crop size in Myanmar as well as in India, the pigeon pea values are in excess of $1,000 today. So obviously, the green lentils from Canada act as a good substitute. And going forward, until your new crop comes in, there'll be very good demand. Typically, India imports 150 to 200,000 tons of green lentils from Canada, and the demand will definitely be there. And as Quinton said, there's not really too much of number twos left in Canada, so obviously the extra threes and number threes will definitely come into India. India will always be a buyer for the lower grades as well, considering the prices and the quality.
All right. This year we saw a lot of demand from Calcutta for Estons. Is this something new or is it?
Yes, this is something new. It's a bit of an experiment because again, earlier it was being sold at lower values, but lately the values have crept up because there has been some interest in buying. But it remains to be seen because the bulk of the cargo is still either in transit and it's still not reached. Some parcels had reached earlier and the response has been good, but again it remains to be seen. The next 4 to 6 weeks will be more clearer whether it can be a repeated feature or whether it's a one-time feature. But the main reason driving it is because of the high prices of pigeon peas.
So is it consumed whole or is it, how is it consumed? The essence?
No, it will be split. It's not consumed as a whole, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So let's table the green lentils for now and up the ante with red lentil fields. Brian, please do us the honor and enlighten us with current and future prospects of red lentils. Thank you.
The big thing, I think with red lentils, because red lentils are the most important of the two lentils that are grown in the world today. And I think that the competition for acres is a very interesting component. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing an increase in lentils, and we'll see an increase in pulses overall. You can see from this chart, and it's maybe a bit hard to follow the prices, but I looked at a World Pulse Index, and I'm looking at prices out of Canada, Australia, Argentina, and other countries, and developed an index for that, where 2004 is equal to 100, and then you just calculate that on a weekly basis. I also do a price index for Canadian pulses, and I think between the two you get a very good picture of where pulses are relative to the other commodities. For oilseeds and cereals, I use the FAO price index, so it's a good international index. And you can see that in the last year, pulses have become more competitive in terms of on a price basis with cereals and oilseeds. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a shift or increased grower interest in growing pulses, not just in Canada, but in other parts of the world. And that's a change from the situation that we saw a few years ago where cereals and oilseeds were out-competing pulses, and that was a driver of pulse prices in the world at that time because it was very hard to convince farmers to grow them without having prices to be, unless prices were stronger. Because for growers, it is a question of what makes the most sense, not just agronomically, but certainly in terms of income. And so we have to always pay attention to what's going on with oilseed and cereal grain prices, because those are going to be leading indicators of where our prices have to be for red lentils and other pulses. World red lentil production has been increasing, and we'll see a further increase this year, and that's driven by two things: good prices and excellent movement. Canada is the dominant producer in the world. Turkey is the next one. Australia is number 3 right now. And area in all those countries should be up over what it was last year, perhaps down for Turkey, but certainly up significantly in Canada and up a bit in Australia, I believe. If you look at the S&D for red lentils, you can see that the last number there, which is the stocks-to-use ratio, is actually the more instructive one. And you can see that the stocks-to-use ratio is low, and it's going to remain low for the coming marketing year. And that is a driver that will help maintain firm prices. They can go lower than they are today, but they will end up in an upward trend. And it's just simply that the trade in lentils is too strong, domestic use is too strong, and this is a strong indication that area should increase again in 2016 and perhaps beyond that. So we have to see those, we need to get to a point where other crops are more competitive for area in red lentils to decrease. This is actually, if you remember the green lentil export chart, this one is very interesting because you can see a solid and very strong upward trend in world trade in red lentils. And I don't know if that's going to end anytime soon. There's certainly, it's very fascinating that it's going this way. And it just tells you that you can't look at the production increases and say, well, that means that prices will be lower. If you have this kind of upward trend in trade, that is going to be, that's just going to absorb all the stocks that are being produced, and that's going to be a contributor to firmer prices going forward. And again, on the import side, India, Turkey are the two leading importers. On the export side, you notice that Canada is the most important exporter. There's not the same sort of distribution on the import side that we saw with green lentils. There's more focus in two market areas. I think in the Middle East and Central Europe, or Western, I don't know what part of Europe that is anymore, Turkey and United Arab Emirates and Egypt, the trade into those areas goes up and down a lot. But as you know, a lot of that is for re-export, for further processing, and then re-export into the region. So those are trade hubs. India is more for direct consumption. Canada is the world's largest red lentil producer, and we're looking at a significant increase in seeded area this year. I think a lot of people would think it'll be up even more than that. If yields are average, we're going to look at a major bump in production in Canada. And, that always when people look at it, they assume that that means that Canada will be cheaper. But there are a lot of factors that go into that will keep prices firm. And we could look at a fairly significant increase in Canadian stocks relative to use by the end of the coming marketing year. But when I do these, I try to be a little bit conservative. I always said before, I try to disappear the crop if I can, but I don't like to just throw numbers in there and go from the assumption that it's all going to be, that stocks will end up very low again. They could very well. But right now, when I look at it, I think the reasonable expectation should be that stocks should increase, and we'll have to look at how demand develops in the coming marketing year. It should start very strong, and we just have to see how it evolves after the September, October, November shipping period. Red lentil prices are way off the highs that we saw a few years ago, but unlike greens, we seem to be in a bit of an upward trend in price. That has broken a little bit recently, and we'll have to see how it evolves in the coming marketing year. But if you're involved in, the other part of this, if you're into technical stuff, is that you can see that we're in a bit of a trading range. And if you see prices break below that significantly or break above that, that would probably establish a new trend, whether it's upward or downward. Again, I look at this again shows you when prices are strongest and weakest throughout the marketing year. You can see that this year, the last couple of years, it's been a little bit weaker in the fall. That should probably tend to make farmers want to hold on to products. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the coming marketing year show a bit of a reversal, with prices being stronger earlier than later in the marketing year. This affects green lentils as well as red, but this is one of the more fascinating things to take a look at, and it has a big impact on lentil prices and trade. And in Canada now, they've been gathering statistics on the rail car supply, how good a job the railways have been doing at meeting the orders of shippers. And what I did was I looked at this, and when I look at it, I say, well, what this is telling me is what is the risk of being able to meet your shipping commitments and meet the needs of buyers. You can see from this that the risk of shipping bulk lentils out of Canada, bulk red lentils out of Canada, is not as great as the risk of trying to move containers out of Canada, for moving stuff in bulk to Vancouver for loading into containers, or to meeting North American domestic market demand. And that has a big impact on price. That risk has to be shared between the buyers and the growers. Farmers, when they look at, farmers feel that they're being pressed down too much on price because of these problems. And I think in some markets, buyers feel like there's too much push upward on price because of the risk that people can't meet their commitments. And, if you're looking at a situation where you have a 35% risk of not getting transportation, that's a significant risk. And you have to put that into your price. You have no choice. Even with bulk Vancouver movement, a 9% risk is hard for people to deal with without passing that cost along to buyers or sharing the cost with farmers in the form of lower bids. And Canadian transportation problems are not unique. The United States has similar problems. And in the U.S., those will not be resolved for another year or so. The railways are expanding capacity, and once that's done, that should be resolved there. But the author of this problem is the mandates that we have in Canada for rail movement. The Canadian government will fine the railways if they don't move a certain amount of grain per week, and that has caused them to emphasize traffic, the routes that they can get the fastest turnaround time on cars. And that's why the risk for moving stuff in bulk through Vancouver is lower than the risk for moving stuff to domestic markets. And it just simply has to do with rail car turnaround times. So in conclusion, we're looking at a significant increase in world red lentil production. I think that could continue for a while. We're looking at demand that has been growing significantly from year to year, that there's definitely an upward trend there. I think some people wonder if, how much longer that can continue, but I think there's a lot of optimism that we will see continued growth in demand and trade in red lentils. And it's not just a transfer of production from net importing to net exporting countries. I think it's an overall growth in consumption of red lentils in the world, which is really good. Transportation risk, as I mentioned, clearly affects price, and that is going to be a factor in the coming marketing year, hopefully less than in the past, but we just have to wait and see how things evolve. And the other last thing is just to say that farmers are very keen about growing red lentils in Canada and I think in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Those were very informative. Thank you. Now let's get back to our panel and find out their thoughts on red lentils. Let's start with Onur. Onur, GMO is a big concern right now in Turkey. Can you enlighten us with this issue, and how big of an impact will that be for the import of lentils?
Well, yes, it's a delicate matter for Turkey because our government has zero tolerance on GMO. Our people think GMO as a poison. So they think if there's something GMO they have eaten, they will die. So this is the common idea. And everybody working against it, but I'm not sure that they know most of the feed items coming to Turkey are GMO approved. So in feed, it's GMO approved, but for human consumption, GMO has zero tolerance. We are a developing country, so we take these technical things from European side or Canadian side. So in Europe, there's a limit of trace of GMO. So I believe we will touch this matter next year because we have elections this year in June. So until then, nobody will touch that issue. But the main problem, in my opinion, is the shipments coming from Canada are farmer dressed. And this farmer dress cargo in Canada has canola, wheat, and lentils. When the government tests this cargo, they take whole the sample. They don't clean it. They don't just put the lentils into the machine. They put the whole sample into the machine, and they test. Of course, there's canola coming inside, and it's GMO. So, what to do? We have to receive machine clean cargo, basically.
So are you suggesting that Turkey will continue to import machine-cleaned lentils and not farmer dress?
I think the buyers will ask for machine clean cargo instead of getting $20, $30 cheaper farmer dress cargo.
Okay. So there is no, the machine clean red lentils have no issue being imported there?
There could be an issue, but since canola is so small, when you sieve it, when you machine clean it, it will pass through the machine, so you will have the lentil and canola separated.
Okay. What is your opinion on the new Turkish crop? Do you agree with Brian that Turkey might produce about 360,000 tons or so?
If we look at the last year's crop, the number is too high, I believe, because we didn't have that much of lentils. I would estimate 250,000 tons, normal number for Turkey, because you see the import numbers are also about 300,000 tons to Turkey. So in Turkey we have 200,000 tons of import and 108 of export. It's the range of import and export balance. And whatever we consume, about 300,000 tons, we produce that usually. So this year I think we didn't have 300,000 produced for our consumption, so we imported a little bit more. But this year, actually, everything's going good. What we hear from the fields and the farmers, the plant development is good. They had the rains which they needed. But last year, when we were in Cape Town, we were sitting here and listening to the Red Lentil panel, and everything was going good also. We were thinking about this 380,000 tons of production. We had rains in May, we had big damage, and we end up with less than 300,000.
I see.
So this year, if you look at it, we had good rains, plant production will be good, but everything is, we have to look at Allah.
All right. Thanks. Peter, let me ask you, what do you think? We hear that Australia doesn't have much crop available right now. There isn't much there. Do you agree with that? What is your opinion? What is the current inventory position there?
In terms of product readily available, we're on fumes in Australia. There's very little product available now.
Something's wrong.
So there's very little product actually available now in terms of new product to trade. So we would expect to hit harvest in sort of October, November with absolutely zero carryout. So I think we'll be very, very tight in terms of stocks. We'll be sold and shipped out, I would think, well before the Canadian harvest.
So at this time, what number would you put for the current inventory? Like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 tons? Just an estimate, I guess.
I think in terms of product still to trade, I think it's effectively zero. In terms of, liquidity. I mean, we're probably picking up, very small amounts on a daily basis now from the farmer. Now, after seeding, there will be another harvest in terms of the product that's left in the bins that the farmer didn't use, and so maybe another 10 or 15,000 comes out after seeding. But I'd say we're theoretically sold.
Do you think this price could go towards $1,100 to $1,200? Do you think this price can go towards $1,100 or $1,200 from Australia?
Oh, I think go to $1,400 or $1,500. Look, I think the reality in any grain market is that high prices kill high prices. We're getting close to, from an Australian perspective, $1,000 a tonne on a CFR basis for Aussie Reds. So, we're certainly pushing up towards historic highs. Where we go here is probably more in the hands of the demand side than the Aussie side. But the farmer has got very little left. And right now, pushing price up to the farmer in Australia isn't producing more grain.
I see. So the new crop, is it the same story like Canada, that you're going to have a larger crop of red lentils?
The main points to make about Australia is this conference this year is probably 4 weeks early. You know, our average break in southern Australia, which where the lentils are produced, is around the 5th of May. Right now we are seasonally dry in southern Australia, and we are very dry. Last year we had a horrible finish, as everybody knows. Our quality was exceptional, but our yields got very savagely curtailed. You know, we probably had potential for well in excess of 300,000 tonnes last year, and we ended up with, I think Brian calls it 200. I would say it's probably was probably less than that. I mean, I was out in the fields at harvest time last year, and it was quite incredible. Typically, really short years and hard finishes deteriorate grain quality. I think the plant breeders and the husbandry that surrounds pulses, certainly in Australia, I mean, I saw almost bonsai lentil crops. They were very, very short, but the grain was perfectly formed and filled, but the combine harvester couldn't actually get 100% of what was produced. So we left an enormous amount of seed sitting on stalks underneath the table of the combine harvester. We simply couldn't get it in. So there was a lot of very expensive sheep feed left in the paddocks after harvest last year.
All right, thank you.
Can I just make a couple of points? That
Sure.
The thing we are looking at right now is there's some talk of El Nino and the likely impact it might have. We will have, you know, we watch the Southern Oscillation Index, which is a index towards whether we're likely to head towards an El Nino or not. And right now it's negative, which isn't great for production outlook. And the positive side is that the sea surface temperatures that surround Australia, and everybody needs to understand Australia is a very dry continent, but the sea surface temperatures actually lend itself to being a little more optimistic about rainfall through the course of the year. But you know, right now we do not have a seed in the ground, and you know, we'll need rain inside the next 4 or 5 weeks to see that happen.
So your typical seeding would be in May, right? Your seeding is in May.
Yeah, we're basically talking a May seeding, and you know, the intentions, I would be prepared to say, are enormous in Australia. Pulses take up less than 7% of the total winter cropping, so all cereals and oil seeds. So pulses have an enormous headroom in terms of rotational flexibility. The Australian farmer can plant a lot more lentils. So, you know, I would say Brian's being conservative in the outlook. I think the crop could be much, much bigger, but we need the rain.
All right, thanks. Anurag, India has again surprised us by coming into the market just when this harvest is just over now. Everybody knows April, May shipments, India came in. Do you think there are estimates that India might be importing 500,000 to 600,000 tons this year? Do you agree with that kind of number?
Typically, Farhan, last year, if you go from the period April to March this year, India has imported almost about 550,000 tons. And our crop last year was about 400,000 tons. And this year we were expecting it to be around 550,000, but some untimely rains have caused damage to the crop. And I see a crop size of about 450 to 475,000 tons. And the demand typically in India for red lentils has gone up over the past few years, and I see a demand this year of almost 1 to 1.1 million tons. That is approximately 100,000 tons of red lentils are being imported and or consumed in India. So if you go back, because of the delays in the shipment during the last, when the Canadian new crops were being harvested, September, October shipment positions were dragged and were shipped even until Jan, Feb. And when the prices had really gone up, and the people there, the importers, they were apprehending that the local prices would go down post a good harvest, because typically there is always a harvest pressure in India, as the Indian farmers are not as well off, and they are not, they really can't stock up and remain away from the markets. So importers had not taken up positions, but because of these untimely rains and damage to the crops, this caused the local markets to go up. And as you also see right now, the cargoes are basically in transit, but there's not really much inventories at all the major ports, be it Bombay, Calcutta, or any other port. We don't have much inventories. So obviously the local markets have gone up, and today they are almost at a level of $900, trading in Calcutta or Bombay, in the vicinity of $900. So the demand will be robust, and I see the values will be strong at least until the new crop in Canada is harvested, because we don't have much there available locally. And all the buyers have now jumped into the bandwagon, which has caused the prices in Canada to go up over the last few weeks substantially. So the demand will be there, and of course, now it will all depend on the new crop in Canada. And of course, we have to see if whether this year also we'll have any transportation issues as Canada had witnessed last year, as Brian also said. So going forward, post the new crop in Canada, looking at the substantial increase in seeding in Canada, and thinking that there should not be, if there is no problem with the crops, the weather gods are merciful, then I think maybe post-September we'll see a big influx of cargo coming into India at the same time, which might cause pressure. But overall, 500 to 550,000, 600,000 tons of imports cannot be ruled out.
Okay. So are you suggesting your buyers to stock up right now?
At these levels, what can I suggest the buyers? It's a crazy market. It's very difficult to apprehend. But as I said, there's not too much of supplies in Canada coming forward. Good quality cargo is not available, because last year even you all had issues during the harvest, and the quality was definitely not at par with that seen in every other year. So let's see. We don't have much offers from Australia as well. So a sort of rationing is going on in the market. But yes, the values will remain strong, at least, as I said, until Canada new crop situation is clear.
All right, thanks. Quinton, there's so much talk about Canada producing a larger crop. First of all, I want to know, do you agree with Brian on a 1.6 million ton estimate?
I think that that's a fairly reasonable place to start. I think it's a fairly conservative estimate based on yields. I think the acreage base could still get 100,000 to 200,000 acres higher than that level that he had on his slide. But certainly we haven't seeded really any acreage yet, so we're a long ways away from harvest. But again, as I mentioned on the green lentils, we're in a good spot today to start on time, and as long as there's not a whole bunch of rain like we saw the last couple of years in April and May, then I think we're off to a good start.
Although we are going to produce a larger crop, how much do you think the logistics will play on the pricing of the lentils?
Well, our Australian friends always like to bug us about the issues that we have in the fall, and I don't think that it'll necessarily be any different. I think from a rail perspective, it will be better than last year. I guess Brian mentioned the mandates from the government. They did take those mandates off. They did threaten the railways that if they saw any issues later on, that they could put them back on very quickly. Personally, I think that the larger issue will be container supply and timeliness of those containers. We've seen transit times almost double as well, which can cause additional issues at destination. But are we going to be able to, as a country, export as many tons as there's demand for? Likely not. If India and other destinations could spread out that demand, that would be more realistic. But that's just not how things work. But yes, there definitely will be some supply issues in terms of getting our product out of the country.
So even though we are going to produce 1.6, 1.7 million tons of that crop, but in the earlier periods from, I think most of the buyers want to buy up to November or December maximum, and mainly containerized shipments, what do you think? How much can we ship?
I don't think it's impossible for Canada to average somewhere between, call it 110 and 130,000 tons a month in containers. But that is at the expense of something else. So if we're also seeing strong demand for green lentils into India, there's only so many containers and so many rail cars. So it's ultimately whoever is acting first and or paying the highest price for that commodity. So I think that there is some extra logistics that will be devoted by the Canadian industry towards red lentils. Obviously, India's bought up some tonnage here in the last month or so. And it likely will be at the expense of commodities like yellow peas or flax or something like that.
There were also some strong reports of a very dry summer in Canada as well. What's your comment on that?
Certainly a lot of the forecasters are calling for a hotter, drier July in particular. I think after the last few years, most farmers in Canada would welcome a drier year versus the wet weather that we've seen. And again, I think if we can get the crop in a timely fashion, I think that it may have some impact on the crop, but it won't be as dramatic. If we get later seeding, then certainly that could be an issue. But personally, I think as long as we can get the crop in the ground, then you're on par for average yields.
All right. I'm sure our audience would like to know your comments on the pricing. What's your opinion?
On which, sorry?
On the pricing of the red lentils. Do you suggest people to buy these current levels, or?
I mean, on the old crop side, I think Peter said it very well. The supply just isn't there, particularly if India wants to buy some significant tonnage right now. There is certainly still some supply in Canada for the lower grades, sample grade and number 3 that I think we're a little bit uncertain as to whether India or some of these other destinations will utilize that quality. So that will impact things as well. If they do, then that will limit how high the extra 3 and number 2 prices can go. But certainly on the old crop side, I'm not bearish whatsoever. On the new crop side, I'd say that the market is certainly pricing in the weather premium, and that weather premium being both the Indian weather, as we're still not out of harvest yet there, and the Canadian fact that we haven't seeded any acres. So if you're buying it now, you're paying for it, and I guess you have the comfort of knowing you have some lentils bought. But certainly as things progress, then you could see that being taken out of the market.
And what about the Turkey issue? Do you think Turkey will be buying new crop reds? How will that impact? Because if they are going to go into only machine clean product, that will limit the capacity somewhat, would it?
Yeah, I guess touching that issue, certainly I think it's a bit ambitious to think that cleaning product eliminates these issues, whether you call that low-level presence of GMO or maximum residue levels, and that, I mean, the testing is becoming, the ability for them to go that extra percentile and further down the line is there every year, and that technology is increasing, and you can add in false positives to that as well. So frankly, cleaning can help it. There's no question. I think that your odds are better to not have an issue potentially, and the Canadian industry can clean it. There is the ability in bulk vessel and containers to clean the lentils. For the most part, the buyers are deciding that on their own if they want to pay that price or not. We certainly will supply them clean lentils, but I would agree that I don't think that the Turkey issue will be resolved prior to the election, and I think that's going to carry into new crop. But frankly speaking, I don't think that whether you call it containerized clean or bulk vessel clean eliminates the issue. And I think that personally, this is something that CSILS really does have to get involved in to ensure that there is free trade between different countries. So I think it will definitely have an impact on both old crop and new crop values into Turkey.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's now hear from our audience with questions that may have for us. Hopefully we'll have enough time to answer all your questions. There's a question right there, Iman, I believe. Yes. Is there someone with a mic? Are there mics?
Farhan.
Yep, Onur would like to add some comment to that.
Okay, there's new developments in Turkey actually.
Onur, your mic is...
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. There's new developments in Turkey about the farmer side. The government has doubled the bonus they give to the farmer for the lentils now. But the farmers didn't know about this before seeding. So if they had this bonus, they would plant much more lentils. So next year, we will see more seeded area. And government has new project for farmer registry system. So the farmers will be observed by the satellite systems, and there will be more accurate numbers from the Turkish stat right now. So for next year, we will be able to talk about the production in much, much accurate numbers. This is what I wanted to add also.
Thanks.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And Turkey, I think, in a unique position because we consume, we produce, we import, and we export. So all these basic 4 things is making our position very unique. We have a capacity of 5,000 tons a day processing lentils. In a year, it makes 1.5 million tons. So we will be definitely a big player in the region.
Definitely.
But also we are losing our markets. For example, we lost our markets to Australia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. They are not buying from us anymore. They are not preferring us. And our only biggest market right now is Iraq and Sudan. And Egypt now, with their own splitters, they are not buying too. So Turkish export market is getting lower and lower. But
All right.
I want to add these also. Peter.
First question from Iman.
Hi, thank you everybody. Anurag, I just wanted you to expand your analysis into the other major Indian subcontinent markets such as Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. Can you please give us your views?
I really wouldn't be very conversant with those markets, Iman. It wouldn't be fair that I give any information about that. I'm sorry.
What was your question, Iman? What would you like to know?
Just the overall analysis, the comparisons and price and consumption demands into those regions. Perhaps Farhan, you're quite versed in those areas as well. Could you give some analysis as to whether it's mimicking the demand in India? Are the prices higher? Is the consumption higher? How do you see the demand in the coming months and new crop?
Pakistan has been a regular importer of lentils this year. There isn't much stocks available. And I think Pakistan is the only country who's also buying for January and February shipments of 2016. So there definitely seems that there is a demand there. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, they are buying as well, and I think they're buying mainly in bulk vessels, Quinton, if I'm not mistaken. There is containerized shipments as well, but again, the stock levels are pretty low there as well. Yep.
I think one of the important things that we've got to recognise right now, and particularly in the case of Bangladesh, there's been, lots of periods of instability in Bangladesh over the last couple of months, and that has kept the Bangladeshi buyers really out of the red lentil market. So in some ways, the Bangladeshi buyer has actually missed this market. It's probably, from an overall pulse industry perspective, not a bad thing, because it probably allows prices to expand in Bangladesh and to allow the importers to make some money and start to repair some of the structural damage that's been done in Bangladesh in the last 12 or 18 months with the political instability there. So they probably missed the Ramadan shipping opportunity. Yeah. So the stocks that are in Bangladesh probably allow the importers and the retailers to make reasonable profits, probably across all of the pulses. And that may go some way to repairing that Bangladesh market, which we all need. It's obviously a very important market for Australia, but having it structurally repaired is important for the pulse trade.
Dharmendra, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is basically pertaining the transportation again. Like I would like to ask Quinton that when you talk about the movement of red lentils into any market, and specifically India, basically what I'm trying to ask, do the buyers have to worry about the container freight vis-a-vis bulk vessel freight and the arrivals of materials into the destination ports in bulk vessels at a huge discount compared to container freights? So do the buyers have to worry about that aspect as well? Because what I understand, so far the rally we have been observing in red lentils is pertaining to containers business primarily, if I'm not wrong. So how much a buyer has to worry about that part as well?
Well, I guess there's two questions there. On the freight spreads, I mean, it's no secret that bulk vessel freight has came off dramatically with the drop in crude oil. We really haven't seen any significant drop whatsoever in those container values, and it's if there's that much demand, there's potential that that spread widens even further as we get it through the season here. Again, I do believe that there is issues on the container side, and a lot of that capacity is being scooped up. And I'd say I can't speak for all Canadian companies, but a lot of us have, I think, come to the grips of what our capacity truly is. It's not what we want it to be if it's coming from a processing site, but it's the reality of the situation. On the bulk vessel side, I would say that there certainly is the capacity available, and from a demand structure or demand perspective, I think that certainly red lentils can quote unquote buy their way into that capacity for August through December. So I think that you will see bulk vessel movement into India specifically, but also into a number of other destinations that will cover some of that gap.
Yeah, one more question, Quinton. If I ask about the freight difference, what do you anticipate vis-a-vis containers and freight, bulk vessels?
Yeah, I guess it's not a black and white.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a wild guess.
Yeah, it's not a black and white question because typically these vessels could go to one port, or it could go to multiple ports even within the same country, depending on what else is on that vessel. So that can add costs to that. But typically we've seen a $20 to $30 difference in prices fairly regularly, and I don't think that that's going to go away.
Is there any other questions?
Right here.
Gopal.
Hello everybody, good morning. I'm Gopal, common trading company from Karachi. I have one question. Still nobody is clear that market will be bullish or bearish. And if I remember last 2008, the market gone up, I think, 13 or 1400 level. So all panelists are going to maybe ask, so what do you think that that level can become as a like 2013 or 14 level?
Who would like to answer that question? I'm sure Gopal has a lot of stock, so he's worried. Current crop, you don't need to worry at all.
I mean, you always get these things wrong, right? But right now, there's just so much demand and there's so little supply in the pipeline. And from an Aussie perspective, I think every $50 or $100 it goes higher from here probably increases, execution risk at the other end, because we are going to start seeing substitution. I guess in some of the key destinations for red lentils, we're also seeing expanding prices in things like Desi chickpeas and others. So the consumer hasn't got a lot of, the consumer, he or she doesn't have a lot of places to run and hide at the present time. So I would think the market does continue to expand in terms of price, at least up until people feel that there's a threat of getting and receiving new crop Canadian shipments. But the stocks are too tight, so really, this market could do anything if you've really got to buy them.
Okay. Quinton?
I guess pertaining to the new crop side of things, I think by default all of us in the room are becoming currency traders, and your perspective on currency ultimately likely will tell you part of the story as well, whether that's the Canadian dollar or the Aussie in this case from the supply side. If you believe that crude oil is going to go back up to $70, $80, or $90 a barrel, from a Canadian perspective, it's going to be supportive, and it could be supportive by 9 or 10%, which will make a big difference on new crop prices for sure, and probably a larger impact than the grower bids perspective. I don't know if Peter wants to talk about the Aussie, but by default, we're all trading that currency, and that will offer some additional exposure to the market.
Any other questions?
We have one here, please.
Meredith. Yes.
Meredith Bassatello, PKT Associates. Brian, you didn't mention Montreal in your risk factor.
Actually, Montreal is included in the transloading, but they're focusing more on the West Coast movements than on Montreal. And I think, I don't think there's some transloading goes on in Montreal, and there's, then there's just source load containers go out that way. And Vancouver is definitely the more dominant port of the two. But there's, there are clear risks there as well, because it's any of the smaller movements in Canada are not getting the same focus as the railways want to put 100 cars in, and you can't do that to Montreal, so you do that to Vancouver or Thunder Bay. And that's where the emphasis is, and that isn't going to shift very, very, very soon. But I think there are a lot of people moving intermodal to Montreal, and that will, that's a different kind of traffic and probably a little bit easier. But I think that the transportation problem in Canada is there for all ports, and it's not going to go away anytime soon.
There's one more question there.
Hi, Farhan. My question is to Anurag. Right now, India is feeling like, there is shortage of lentils. Indians are buying mainly September, October, November shipments. Do you think that Indians will come up to buy Jan, Feb, or December, Jan shipments as well? Do you think that it is secure? Just wanted to understand.
A lot of business has been done for Sep, Oct, and Oct November, and as I said, a lot will depend on the shipments and first of all, how the crop is in Canada, what the logistical issues are in Canada, and going forward, we've also seen some bulk lentils being sold in good quantities into India. So if there's a lot of influx at the same time, you see bulk movement is a different segment, whereas containers are a different segment. So and I don't think that the bulk shipments really go through much problems compared to that of the containerized shipments. So a lot will depend on the arrivals. If there are a lot of arrivals at the same time, there'll definitely be a big pressure in the markets. So going forward, the buyers are a bit skeptical. They don't want to take positions today for December, Jan, or Jan, Feb. As Farhan was saying, maybe some buyers in Pakistan are doing it, but in India, I'm not seeing this happening at this time.
Any other questions? I guess not. Let me ask you guys some questions. Most of the people would like to know, Quinton, $850 is somewhat September, October, $820 levels are October, November. How much do you think Canada has capacity to sell more of that in containers? I believe it's been big volumes are already traded for those numbers, but for those shipments.
I guess, all right, just to clarify, are you asking will we continue to sell at those levels?
Yeah.
I mean, from a producer return perspective, it's certainly a profitable level. From a grower perspective on marketing, they are nervous somewhat because of what happened last year. A lot of these growers got heavily discounted because of off grades. If they had total production failure, it was really a disaster for their farms. There were some farms that had $200,000 and $300,000 and $400,000 penalties because they didn't produce the crop. So by default, they're being a little bit more conservative. So what I would say is if India just continues to come and come and come, no, I don't think you're going to see things stabilize there. I think you'll see them go higher. But if there is some patience and people wait things out a little bit more, then you could see things soften. But again, that likely won't be until we're all comfortable that the acres are planted, that the conditions are okay, that the heat that you mentioned before isn't having a dramatic impact on things. So that the time of that could be well into to this summer.
And the shipping capacity, do you think we still have enough room to sell more of that positions or no?
Again, I think it really depends if it's just containers or in bulk vessel. And containers, I think certainly a good chunk of the capacity, particularly for September, October, has been sold out of Canada. Obviously, the November, December, Jan, Feb is fairly open. Not a lot sold for that position. So that's some of the gambling, if you want to say it, as we're in Vegas, for people to do, is you can bet on the prices being weaker in the fall, but will the capacity actually be there to market those tons?
Peter, we heard a lot of new crop trades of Australia as well. Is this usual or this is unusual this year?
Oh, I think people are trying to manage their capacity in terms of planning future logistics. And I'll make just a very quick comment on Aussie logistics. I see, because we have a range of ready, accessible container ports and indeed bulk shipment ports around the coastline, I don't envisage any transportation issues. I don't really see any major transportation risks from an Australian perspective. But that doesn't mean, processors don't want to plan as far out as they possibly can. And to be honest, these values represent reasonable opportunities for Australian farmers. They're profitable. I've been saying for quite some time now that wheat doesn't have any friends. The Australian farmer is very, very sensitive to wheat prices, and he's looking at prices for key products like lentils and desis, and to a lesser extent peas and faba beans, and they like what they see. They're going to push their rotations a little harder, seed permitting, and of course weather permitting. So we're seeing the farmer get quite active at the present time, and it's encouraging to see. So it's enabling people to look at those forward positions.
Today, what are the levels for new crop Australian lentils? Just a ballpark figure.
To the farmer?
No, in the CNF market.
Well, we would normally trade at a premium to Canadian values simply because we just have much better quality and much more reliable service. But so I guess Australian product, because it's seen a little drier. It's drier. It's a pretty good product. We're probably trading anywhere from a $15 to up to $30 premium on a day for a like product. And I think that's really just a reflection that the Aussie product tends to come off cleaner and drier. I mean, some of these farmers, and I've said for a long time, the combine harvester that a farmer has access to today is like a mobile cleaning plant. They can dress up the sample very, very nicely. So, the customer is getting very nice product straight off the combine.
All right. I guess, any other questions? Nope. Thank you for your questions and comments. If there is any further questions, please come up to us. We are here for the next couple of days. Send us an email, and we'll be more than happy to answer. On behalf of Simpson Seeds and Sissels, I would like to personally thank Brian, Anurag, Peter, Prabhat, Quinton, and Onur for their valuable time today. Sorry. Thank you.